Hello Chums, and welcome to Taming a Monster, the series where I take some of Gran Turismo 7's most ridiculous cars to see if I can tweak them so that a talentless pleb like me can handle them without being killed to death. Like any common ruffian, I'm using a bog standard PlayStation 5 controller, and I have all driver assists turned off, except for ABS. Let's see what car is trying to murder me today. Last time out, we had a supercharged V8 race car engine fitted to a puffed up family hatchback. This time around, we have a sports car that came out of the factory with a twin-turbo V6, and now it has a slightly bigger twin-turbo V6. This might just be one of the most sensible engine swaps in all of Gran Turismo 7. As usual, the Fairlady GTR has every upgrade. That includes weight reduction, all power upgrades, wide body, and the body rigidity increase. None of the settings have yet been adjusted, except for the downforce, which is maxed, and the transmission, which has already been tweaked to suit this car. The Z32 R35 has aftermarket wheels larger than the standard size, which could potentially bite me in the arse because bigger wheels typically prove to be less forgiving in Gran Turismo 7, and curbs can potentially unsettle the car more than if I stuck with a smaller size. I have fitted a front splitter for front downforce, the ever important rear diffuser for extra front and rear downforce, and a big ugly custom wing set which provides more rear downforce than the more subtle options. If you're interested in learning more about aero, downforce, or any other aspect of tuning your car, I have a series called Tuning for Beginners which covers everything from suspension to differential to the transmission. The chosen track today was Suzuka. The launch was predictably lacking thanks to the obscene power and not enough weight pushing the rear tyres down to harness it. Beyond that, the 300ZX actually surprised me. It could have been a lot worse. Even the brakes weren't half bad. As usual, there was plenty of body roll, though the car's main problem would be exiting low-speed corners thanks to that excessive wheel spin. For my first changes, I slightly increased rear ride height to make the car look better and cure my aesthetic OCD. I then increased anti-roll bars and natural frequency as usual. Setting the anti-roll bars higher at the rear can somewhat prevent oversteer under braking, and setting the frequency lower at the rear can help with power oversteer. The car was already noticeably improved. Oh shit. Whoops. Overall, the Z32 R35 GTR ZX is already a fairly easy machine to handle, with its biggest issue still being wheel spin and power oversteer.
Leave some space, you pissing nonce.
To be quite honest, I'm surprised the car is already this good. The 300ZX is a car which has always suffered with excessive wheel spin in previous games, primarily due to how much power it can be upgraded to. However, in previous games, it's never been particularly easy to work around that wheel spin. In Gran Turismo 7, the car seems overall much more forgiving.
Move, you fat ass.
For my next changes, I adjusted the LSD. Decreasing initial torque will make the car more agile. Decreasing acceleration sensitivity will help with power oversteer by sending more power to the inside wheel. Decreasing braking sensitivity will make the brakes feel sharper and make trail braking easier, potentially at the expense of some stability. The difference this time around was subtle, but still a step in the right direction.
Well done, you mudblood.
The LSD changes made it so that the car didn't transition to power oversteer quite so quickly, and was slightly easier to keep in a straight line, while also feeling more agile and easier to throw into a corner.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
For my final changes, I increased compression, which can help the car deal with curbs. I reduced camber to hopefully improve straight line traction. I also added some front toe out to reduce instability when braking, and I added some rear toe in to reduce power oversteer. I also added a few kilos of ballast to the rear axle, which will improve traction, but can also add lift-off oversteer, which I'm hoping is already cancelled out by the front toe settings. Not to toot my own tiny little horn, but I was actually quite pleased with the job I'd done. The car felt less prone to wheel spin, especially when exiting corners in second gear, and the ballast weight didn't add any unwanted instability. The car was still just as agile on the low speed corners, and the brakes weren't affected too much either. So, it was time to see how well that would translate to the Nordschleifer. Surprisingly, I didn't need to make any further changes to the setup for this car to work well on the green hell. The car does still suffer with wheel spin however, so if you prefer the car to be more stable, you can add more ballast to the rear axle or reduce front downforce. The VR38 engine in the Fairlady 300ZX is an engine swap I often forget exists, when the 787B swapped RX-7 and V12 Supra are both much more memorable. even though they are all Japanese front-engined rear-wheel drive sports cars with 1000 horsepower engine swaps. As a result, this one often gets ignored, which is both unfair but completely expected. The reason it's unfair is because this car actually drives a lot better than you might give it credit for, with its overall characteristics a very good match for the V12 Supra. The reason it isn't surprising is because both of those cars are better. The Supra has the V12 sound, more rear downforce, making the car overall more stable, and since it has better weight distribution from the factory, you don't need to add rear ballast like I recommend with this car. Meanwhile, the R26B swapped RX-7 has similar performance, but sounds completely insane, and since it has a Group 1 engine, it has amazing fuel economy, making it very overpowered in races that feature fuel consumption. This car, while showing similar performance, doesn't really have anything to help it stand out against the other two, which means it's largely forgotten. Not to mention, the standard 3-litre V6 is capable of almost 900 horsepower once fully upgraded, so it's not really down on power all that much when compared to the engine swap, and it sounds similar. So while this car handles its power very well, it wouldn't be my first choice for this engine. The Lancia Delta will win that debate every time. If you are choosing between this and the Alpine A110, however, that may be more difficult. This has more downforce, is more stable, and handles better, believe it or not. But again, the 300ZX's standard engine brings all the same things to the table. Fitting the VR38 to the Alpine, meanwhile, transforms it into a totally different car, so I suppose I would still swap that before this. In the end, the 300ZX GTR Nismo R35 Z32 something managed just under 6 minutes 15, placing it just behind the Mazda RX-7 and slightly further behind the V12 Supra. Still a pretty good showing though. So, that was my attempt to tame a monster. I hope my settings helped, or that you enjoyed this video. Join me next time where I'm driving another V12. Thank you very much for watching, and if you're feeling particularly generous, I would greatly appreciate your subscription. Take care now, and ta-ra.